it's easy to think, well, how can someone be a real expert in this one area of, say, athlete nutrition if she's also doing all of the stuff in that health and wellness space? But we all know that in order to be your best, the best athlete you can be, you have to have that foundation of health as well. And so whilst things might seem really removed, they actually are, you just can't separate one from the other.
Welcome to the Beck and Siri Show.
And here at Team Sirius Tri Club, it's not just about swim, bike, run. It's about who you become. On our show, we don't just talk to you about swimming, cycling and running.
We talk about mindset. We talk about fearless authenticity and being your very best self.
Hi there, Cam here from Team Sirius. This week on the show we have Mikki Williden, PhD, who is a nutritionist, and she chats to us about fueling for performance, hoshimotos, protein intake and supplementation for vegans and vegetarians. Mikki's also the co-host of the great triathlon podcast, Fitter Radio. So I hope you enjoy it.
But we're so excited to have you, Mikki. I have actually just stalking you again. We're stalking quite regularly when we're on Instagram and Facebook. But I would love to, before everyone jumps on, let's do an amazing intro for this incredible woman. I was introduced to her by Cameron Langsford, who is kind of the glue that holds our entire club together. Cam does our marketing, he does our payment system, he does all our advertising, he does everything. But Mikki, we're so grateful. We hear that you are one of the top and most renowned nutritionalists in New Zealand, and specifically for athletes too. And you offer a wide range. I have to mention you have a PhD as well. They are not easy to come by. I couldn't even finish my exercise science degree, but I did do exercise nutrition and I loved it. So I'm with you there. But you work from corporate, elite level sports people, media personalities, anyone looking to improve their lifestyles through healthy eating and living, and it extends to people experiencing fatigue, digestive health, reduced energy level, unwanted weight gain, cholesterol and blood sugar dysregulation, or general poor health. And we're so excited to have you. And Siri, do you want to add anything to that? Because I know Siri's really been looking forward to this, and she's jumped on, which means she definitely wants to be here, because sometimes she's tried to conserve her energy. So
yeah, Mikki, we're just so happy to have you here. Obviously, our athletes mean the world to us. We want to make sure they're getting the very best information in the world. And we know that you're one of those people that can offer them that. And I'm eager to learn as well. So thank you for being here. It's an honor to have you here with us and the team.
It is such a pleasure. Thank you so much. And when you get people that kind of read out your bio like that, you're like, God, that person sounds amazing. I'm not. However, what really strikes me actually is, if you think about the things that I've kind of put there is, I deal in this and this and this. And I also will say, like, I've often thought over the years, maybe I really should just only work with athletes, or only work with people with digestive issues, or only think about hormones. But I'm just a bit too interested in everything. So I like to, so that is probably why it seems like I've got this massive shopping list of things I'm interested in and do, because it is actually, we're all, at the end of the day, regardless of what your issues or your needs, so is probably a better description, they should be kind of in that basis of how can we be as optimally healthy as we can.
I agree 100%. And can you tell me what made you get into this? Did you have health issues? I don't know your whole background, but what really drew you into starting what you do, and like being so experienced at it now? Like, what drew you into that field?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I was probably a lot of us on the call, like, just obsessed with, exercise and nutrition in my younger years. And, or maybe that is just me. Actually, it's probably just me. And so I looked for ways to kind of be able to, initially I was always going to go to university and do my nutrition degree, but I just got a little bit kind of waylaid until probably my third year of university, and I jumped on to do physical education after that. Then I needed something to back it up, because I realized quite quickly that I did not want to be a personal trainer. So that's where nutrition kind of came in, and I think it's in I suppose with regards to the athlete side of things, it's because I am a runner and have been a runner since my late teens, that you just attract like attracts like, right? So if you're a nutritionist and you have an interest in the sports, etc., then you'll get other athletes going, well, she might know a little bit of, what she's talking about. But what I will say is, despite going through that traditional kind of the science degree in nutrition and working in that space along the, I suppose, more conventional sport nutrition guidelines, I really had a change in my approach. Maybe, I think it was about 10 years ago now, where I was, you got these guidelines for carbohydrate, and particularly my female athletes, none of them would shift weight. All of them would have GI issues. And so it was almost not a joke, but it was kind of like, oh yeah, you're sitting up here lecturing, you're talking about these sports nutrition guidelines, but then you and your colleagues are going, mate, if I ever put my female athletes on them, they just bomb. So I suppose it was that I had this almost kind of epiphany in relation to work-related stuff as well, that, what you see, you've got guidelines as evidence, if I can, and those guidelines backed up by randomized controlled clinical trials and that in the laboratory setting. But how does that actually relate to practice? And what is as what influenced me changed, I realized that they didn't always have this real happy kind of integration of best case scenario. And in fact, evidence from that kind of science perspective can help inform on mechanisms and certainly can tell you a lot. It doesn't tell you what happens with the individual. And so I kind of delved into the space of that kind of more minimally processed, a lower carb, a strategic carb approach, really focusing on that health aspect. So yeah, it's a journey, it's an evolution, and things are constantly changing. And you guys will know this, I'm sure, because it's the same with coaching. You do things a certain way, and then you figure out that, and then you find new information, you're like, okay. And so you kind of, you shift what your approach is. And some people can be quite suspicious of people that are constantly zigging and zagging. But I think it just shows that, you have to keep an open mind when it comes to your approach, particularly when you're working with individuals.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so much new information coming in with, we have a really holistic, a functional medicine almost approach to everything. And obviously with Siri's being in remission now, we've even been more aware of just food and how you have to fuel your body so well and be so careful. But I have so many questions, but I'm not going to hold the conversation because I could literally be here for 3 hours. I'm thinking all these things I want to ask, but I'm going to bring it back to the team because our amazing Mary Carmen Farish is one of our head coaches. She's from Mexico, and she has collected a lot of questions. I know you've got them, MC, or I have them too on Facebook if you want MC to go through any of those, or if you want me to. But we have so many questions, so we're going to try not to hog too much of your time either, maybe, because I can call you Mikki.
Yeah, please.
Because we're just so grateful to have you here, and we know how busy you are. So, MC, do you want me to do the Facebook questions? You don't go through them first, and then we can go to these guys that are live as well.
I have them. I actually screenshotted them, so
you're amazing.
we can go over them. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and we're so excited to have you. It's always good to learn different points of view about nutrition and all that stuff, because like you said, everything changes so much that it's okay, what's going on right now?
Yeah.
So the first
MC is kind of our go-to nutritionalist right now for the team. She's been amazing. A lot about athletes, so I know she's just so excited to have you on. I can see her blushing there under the light, but no, she's been amazing help for us. It's really good to hear from you two, MC, on your thoughts too.
Brilliant.
So first question, what's your opinion on intermittent fasting when you are training? Is it doable, or will it hurt performance while training on an empty stomach?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it all really comes back to kind of context and also what the overall goal of the athlete is. So if you are an athlete and one of your goals is to improve your body composition because you recognize that carrying additional body fat is actually limiting your performance, then that's where looking at techniques to help improve the body composition is really important, and intermittent fasting or time restricted eating can really play a role in that, because it's not always necessarily about reducing down food intake so much as it might be about looking at the distribution of that food intake and kind of shortening that eating window. We know from a research standpoint, and this is in a sedentary population, that even shortening down the eating window whilst keeping calories the same can help improve muscle mass and help, drop down the insulin response and drop down mass. Athlete really depends on the type of athlete that we're talking about, and as I said, their goals. But of course, you guys are triathletes. You train, even your kind of, base training or light training, it's still a lot of hours out there. And one of the problems with triathletes is that you're type A. Do you see how I don't put myself in that? But, it's like if something works, then I might want to do it harder or faster or longer. And so it's making sure that you're utilizing that TRE approach in a really appropriate way. For an athlete, then, you'd want to look at, certainly, I think across the board from a health perspective, eating within a maximum 12 hours a day, regardless, should be your prime kind of focus. And that's regardless of whether you're really happy with the composition or whether you might need to shift this up. Because we know that poor metabolic health can be the outcome if you eat and extend beyond that. Of course, everyone is different and your needs might be different, but that's a general rule. And then if you wanted to put in some additional time-restricted eating, it might be that on a lighter or a recovery day, you can kind of pull that in a little bit to say 10 hours and have a 14-hour kind of window. I really hesitate. I don't know that there's a place for a 16-8 protocol in a triathlete's regime. Again, it depends on your training, because then you do run the risk of one, putting yourself in a metabolic hole, because it's just you unintentionally will completely under-eat calories, and you do need calories. And you minimize the opportunity to take on board nutrients. And your body needs nutrients. So yeah, that's that. So you can see that it just really comes down to the athlete and their goals. Yeah.
Awesome. I think that's a great answer. And I love what you said, if it were a priority that the athlete decided that they really needed to do this in order to increase their performance, then there's like a time and a place to do that. And that would probably be, when you're in your off-season training where you're still being active, but you're not in that hard race training. So I love that idea. Thank you for that.
Awesome.
All right, MC, do you have the next question? I can go with you on this. So you
Yes,
place.
Thank you. So the next question, I'm a little bit confused about this question, but maybe there is a thing about different nutrition for elevation, but it says, what are the best foods or drinks for going from low elevation to high elevation for a few days of hard training, racing, and vice versa?
Great question. And no, I think I get what we're talking about here. So I'm imagining we're talking about altitude and like training and racing at altitude. And so your glycogen or your muscle carbohydrate stores are going to be utilized far more readily when we go up at high altitude. So even if you are a lower carb athlete, I think that there is scope to make sure that you increase your carbohydrate intake from really good sources like sweet potato, like fruit, depends on the person, yams, things like that, because these also provide nutrients, whereas say just normal bread wouldn't provide the same nutrient profile. But incorporating more carbohydrate, I think, would be key, because the intensity increases because the stress on the system at high altitude is going to be greater. So certainly thinking about carbohydrate intake. And if you are a lower carb athlete or you're in some fat adaptation phase, it's all about carb timing. So I just wouldn't panic about this idea that suddenly you're bumping up your carbs where you weren't otherwise. Like, again, it comes down to what you're trying to achieve. But also iron as well is really important. And so including iron-rich foods. Now, we've got, and I'm sure you are aware of this, but there are plant-based sources of iron and there are animal-based sources of iron. The animal-based sources are much more bioavailable, and you can utilize about 20% of the iron that you find in those animal-based sources compared to just 2% that you find in plant. Is cool, particularly for vegetarian athletes, to be even more mindful of, say, supplementing with an iron supplement and vitamin C to help improve the absorption of that, than, say, an omnivore athlete. But even still, you need more iron-rich foods because you have an increased production of, red blood cells, etc. So, and it's not just kind of red meat, it's things like pate, liver, mussels and oysters. I don't know too many people who would sit down to like a dozen oysters, but on every night occasion. But these are the richest kind of iron-based foods, and excuse me, and it is actually recommended that if you're going to be having periods of time where you are at high altitude, to in fact supplement, regardless, because your body will it'll only be beneficial for you. And with iron supplementation, timing is critical, and so you want to supplement every second day as opposed to every day, because your receptors don't respond as well in the body, so it needs a little bit of a break. So it's kind of like pulse therapy, so iron every second day. And in terms of when to take it, you want to take it in the morning, no more than, say, an hour after training. And this is because there's an enzyme in the gut called hepcidin, and it rises in response to training, and hepcidin will bind iron and will prevent you from being able to absorb it. So it sounds pretty particular, every second day, an hour after training in the morning, but it kind of is. So those are two that immediately spring to mind.
That's amazing. And Ben asked that, and Ben's on. So Benny, did that help you at all? Do you have anything else you want to add to that? Because I know this is one of your questions.
No, that's absolutely perfect.
Okay.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you, Mikki.
Thank you.
Thank you. I actually have a question, and I'm sorry if you said that and I got a little bit distracted, but did you talk about protein at all? Like in terms of like, this within the same question and altitude, just in terms of recovery, or is that something that you might focus on?
I'm a massive advocate of protein anyway, and certainly it's critical for obviously recovery, but also appetite regulation, focus, concentration, hormones and enzymes and things like that. And but from a if I'm thinking about athletes that I work with, I suppose it's my bias, because we're already focusing on protein. I don't really think about it in terms of and in addition, you need to boost protein because of this. I haven't seen any literature actually that would suggest that protein requirements are higher than what I would otherwise recommend. But if you know something, MC, then absolutely. Like, is there anything you'd want to add?
No, I was asking because
okay. Yeah, cool. No, that's a great question. And what there is a potential, of course, because of the additional stress, there's an additional metabolic cost. Training is catabolic. So I think that is such a good point that you raise, and that real focus on recovery should be a thing anyway for any athlete that is undergoing a heavy training load. But certainly in that when there's environmental stress.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we have another question by Patrice. Patrice, do you want to ask that since you're here?
Let's let her.
Okay. There's so much now after the movie Game Changers and a total plant-based diet. And I was wondering what you thought, especially for endurance athletes.
Yeah, that
You know,
that
just
is
totally plant-based.
Yeah, that is such a great question. And I think that if there is someone who is, if that's their preference, that they would like to be fully plant-based, and they feel like they thrive on that approach, then that's awesome. What we need to be mindful of, though, are a few things. Is that protein requirements will increase because your body doesn't use that it's not as bioavailable as it is from animal protein. So protein needs will increase by about 30%. And then there's also nutrients. So we know, obviously, I just talked about iron. B12 isn't available in any plant-based sources. You will find B12 in some plant-based sources, but it's in a form that will block our body's ability to utilize our own B12. So you cannot rely on plant-based sources of B12. There is also zinc. Is essential. Vitamin A, whilst there is the precursor to vitamin A, beta carotene, in an array of like vegetables, etc. The ability to convert that to what we need, which is retinol, it's not that great. So taking a vitamin A supplement is also recommended. And then you've got your zoo nutrients. Zoo nutrients is what they're called, like creatine. Which you only find in meat-based products. There are others, and it's just totally escaping me. I'm so sorry. So I guess what I'm getting at is that if you wish to be a plant-based athlete, that's awesome. You just need to ensure that you're getting adequate nutrients from which you're eliminating when you eliminate that animal protein. What I will also say is that Game Changers movie was really well funded. And it was really well made, and it was super compelling, and it was not based in science. And so I agree. Yeah. So I just think that, and it's really challenging for me as a nutritionist who is an advocate for an omnivore approach in general, but also recognizing there are individual differences. But it's a hard space to be in when you're an advocate for animal being, really, in this, when there is all of the voices telling us not. And anyone who is, unsure about the whole meat thing from an environmental or animal health perspective, or, is there a better way to do things? I'd really recommend checking out Diana Rogers, who is a registered dietitian in the States. She's a book called The Sacred Cow, and it's just been released actually in July. Her and Rob Wolf, who someone might know from the Paleo Solution books. But it's, it's just good information. So I really recommend. And there is a movie coming out called The Sacred Cow as well. Just wasn't as well funded, so it's just taking its time to come out.
Yeah, no, great, thank you. Because there's so many things that are not addressed that people don't realize.
I know, yeah. And, from a body composition perspective, it is so much more challenging for a vegetarian athlete to maintain a good body composition, and because of the ability to gain muscle mass, but also do it in the sense of load more calories, because in order to get the protein you need, you actually have to eat a ton more calories. Get that at least 30 grams of protein in each meal. So you might have to eat like 6 cups of quinoa to get that 30 grams of protein, which is about 600 calories, compared to, say, 150 calories that you might find in a chicken breast to supply the same thing. So, and I know it's not all about calories, but and actually for some athletes it is about calories.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Can I add, because I know there was another question that kind of relates to this. What kind of foods do you suggest for vegans that help with iron and protein? I know you mentioned quinoa, but what are some other high protein sources?
Yeah, great question, Siri. So from a whole food perspective, one of the best sources of protein would be organic, ideally, because it will contain the 9 essential amino acids that just readily come in the animal protein, although bearing in mind that your protein requirements will increase by about 30%. So if, for example, you were on, say, 100 grams of tofu, which actually is pretty low, you'd want to bump that up to, say, 130, if I did my maths correctly. So certainly tofu, edamame beans obviously is, well, tofu. Yep, so tofu, the edamame beans obviously incorporated is important. Do you know, you actually, as an athlete, you'll need to get on a protein powder. And actually, I recommend protein powder for most of my athletes, to be honest, because it is very challenging outside of the tofu, or tempeh is another one, which is fermented tofu, to get your protein requirements. And I know that there are a lot of other vegetarian products out there. So you'll get vegetarian sausages, and you'll get the corns, but with a Quorn, and you'll get this thing called seitan, Seitin, is I think how you spell it, which is like a wheat-based protein. You'll get a bunch, and the Impossible Burger, but they're really highly processed, and actually they are junk food. So, and if you are wanting to put the best fuel in your body to kind of nourish yourself, then I would stick to those minimally processed. Bearing in mind, of course, protein powder is completely processed.
Yeah.
But
can I jump
but
in
you
with the protein powder, because there's so much out there, and some based, soy based, whey, and we get so many different stories. Like, what's your theory on like trying to choose a good protein powder? We work with F2C Nutrition, but what's your views on protein powders?
Yeah, so I tell people to look at the ingredient list, and you want one with the minimal amount of ingredients. So whey protein isolate it's dairy based, obviously, because it's whey, but it is stripped of casein protein, which is the potentially inflammatory protein. So for people who tolerate dairy or who tolerate whey, that is going to be the best bang for your buck, because it has the branched chain amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, valine, which help stimulate muscle protein synthesis, and with that kind of repair and recovery of musculoskeletal tissue. But you don't want it with all of the fillers and all of the additives. Like, I remember when I was 20, I used to be on the Body for Life stuff. Was all over that. If anyone remembers Bill Phillips, and he had this like EAS protein powder, and you'd stick like a scoop of it in water, and it would puff up like ice cream. It was amazing. Something seriously wrong with that though. So all of the fillers and the additives and the sweeteners, it was delicious, but probably not the best thing to be having. So you want the least amount of ingredients, and so either it would be an unflavored protein powder, or it would have, say, vanilla bean, stevia, or thormartin, or allulose as a sugar alternative. Maybe xylitol or erythritol would play a role there, but ideally, not the ones with sucralose or other of those really artificial sweeteners. And this is just my, if you've got a pretty decent protein powder, it's got 3 or 4 ingredients, and one of them is sucralose, like, I don't think that's not going to be the make or break of your athletic career or your health. But, if you're looking to choose something that's a little bit better, those are the things that I look for in an ingredient list. Of course, if you don't tolerate dairy, the pea protein, and potentially a pea that is blended with a rice-based protein, so you've got that complete amino acid profile, I would look for that. And I would steer clear of soy protein, actually, just because whole-based soy, like tofu, edamame beans, minimally processed, it incorporates phytoestrogens. That is not really, as we understand it, an issue from a health perspective. The real issue is that soy is a cheap protein filler, and it is in so many of our packaged food products that it's it's suggested not to be ideal for health. The research is quite mixed, but your best bet is to from a protein powder perspective, go for the I would say the pea or the rice. And I see that someone I popped up in the chat about Airborne. I think that the Airborne products, I'm so sorry, as I understand it, have about a gazillion ingredients, and to the chagrin of all my lovely friends who sell it, I'm like, I'm not as much of a fan of that. But again, that's my opinion, and so someone else might give you an alternative, and that's sweet.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. That was so helpful. I'm taking
Oh,
lots of
good.
notes. I think everybody is.
Oh, good.
So now that we're talking about protein, I personally actually have two questions. So the first one is, what are your thoughts on collagen? And then what are your thoughts on taking BCAAs in training and racing? Because I know that a lot of us athletes are just used to taking carbohydrates, and it's a little bit harder to digest. So, you know, that's why a lot of people are hesitant. But what are your thoughts about BCAAs? And I guess there's this controversy between BCAAs and EAAs. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, collagen. Collagen it contains conditionally essential amino acids. So we can produce glycine ourselves, but under periods of stress or in with diets that might not. No, I'll just say under periods of stress, we may need a little more than what our body can produce. And so that's glycine and also proline as well. Having said that though, you know, people aren't very good at eating nose to tail anymore. And that when you eat nose to tail in terms of animal protein, you're getting in a lot of the collagen that you would get from kind of food-based sources when you say slow cook a joint of meat, and then the connective tissue and stuff that the meat is attached to the bone, that it cooks down and you're able to kind of consume it, and you're getting in that protein source. So the amino acid source, which is protein. So I think people aren't as good at actually getting dietary collagen, so a supplement can be a great idea. Now if you do like gnaw on chicken bones, I do that, or the kind of gelatinous parts of meat, or you eat chicken skin, then they'll contain appreciable amounts of collagen. And also, so the other thing is if you eat sardines with the little bones or salmon with the bones in, again, you're getting in some collagen. If you don't, I would probably take a collagen supplement. And we do know from a research perspective that if you are an injured athlete, having collagen and vitamin C together helps accelerate that healing of that injured area. So it might be a sprain or a tear, or it might even be like a break. And there is actually a particular protocol associated with it that was developed by AIS, the Australian Institute of Sport, I believe, and also some researchers out of, I want to say Loughborough University or similar, Keith Barr and his research group. I wrote a blog about it actually. And so if you Googled injury prone read this, you would see kind of the details of it: 15 grams of collagen, 50 milligrams of vitamin C, an hour before doing exercises in and around that injured area. Because oftentimes with joint injuries and stuff, there's not a lot of blood flow, and so injury can be impaired. So by taking the collagen with the vitamin C, waiting an hour for those amino acids to hit the bloodstream, then doing some activity in and around that injured area to direct that blood flow, it's going to help enhance recovery. And they've seen it in case studies as well as in that kind of laboratory setting. So collagen would be something I would incorporate for my athletes, but don't go thinking it's equivalent to your protein powders, because it's not. It doesn't contain those branched chain amino acids, which was your next question. So it's always in addition to rather than instead of. When it comes to branched chain amino acids, I'm definitely a fan. And actually for myself, like I've always sort of talked about it, but now I'm totally doing it for the last couple of months. After every training session, I'm having some Muscle Farm natural BCAAs in my drink bottle. One, it helps me drink actually, so it helps with my hydration. But I really notice an improvement in recovery, and it's not that it helps, well, it does help with muscle protein synthesis, but more it helps preserve muscle and bone, and so you're not breaking down, you're not as catabolic. So I would recommend certainly post-exercise session having some BCAAs. And also for my athletes, I do recommend as an alternative to glucose, or the same amount of glucose, that you chuck BCAAs in your drink bottle when you're on a long run, and you consume it at around 5 grams an hour or so, because, branched chain amino acids will help supply the nervous system with fuel. And we know that some studies have shown that when you look at cyclists, that they bonk, and they're not bonking because they're low in glycogen or low in muscle carbohydrate stores. They're bonking because their brain has run out of fuel. So any way that you can help supply that fuel source to the brain is hopefully going to help preserve performance across that training cycle. And it's funny, MC, you say the controversy between essential amino acids versus branched chain amino acids. And I don't know that it's necessarily a controversy, but I understand, there are, it's not just BCAAs we're burning up when we're out there training. It is, all amino acids. So I would say it comes down to what you've got on hand. And I know that not everyone will agree with that, but if you have, an adequate protein in your diet, and it's from a variety of sources, then maybe just stick to the BCAAs. But whichever one you choose, you want to make sure that you've got a ratio of 2:1:1 to leucine, isoleucine, and valine. So you want double the amount of leucine that you do to the isoleucine and valine.
That was incredible. Thank you so much.
Unreal.
No, pleasure.
Dan, where are you, Dan the man? Dan is our amazing yoga teacher. He's an amazing athlete too. So, Danny boy, thank you. You want to ask your question? I think you should ask it personally to this amazing lady.
All right, absolutely. Mikki, thanks so much for your time today. I know all of us appreciate it. We're so grateful to have you with us. It's just like,
awesome.
Oh my gosh, like part of me is always like, can I just have your autograph? Like, I want to be like, I know this person. So thank you for sharing your information and everything. I really love you guys. So my question has to do with Hashimoto's and hypothyroid, because I have both of those conditions. And along with that, as we increase our strength, our stress levels due to training, how do we combat that so that our liver function doesn't completely go in the tank?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dan. And to my mind, it's all about, so obviously you need to protect your thyroid function, and I assume that you're on some, medication for that as well. Yep, cool. But from a nutrient standpoint, or from a diet standpoint, as much as you can, you want to remove the inflammatory triggers from your diet, because anything that's going to spark a inflammatory reaction is going to also likely spark an immune reaction as well. And so with any kind of overactive immune system, you want to do things which help dampen it down. And that's one of the critical things. And everyone is different as to what might boost their antibodies up. And so it can, and I don't doubt that you've probably dialed in your diet already, but if you're struggling with it, then certainly removal of dairy, removal of gluten, removal of alcohol, three of the main things, and also the added sugar. And when I say added sugar, I don't just mean, table sugar. I'm thinking from all sources. So, dates, coconut sugar, maple, honey, these may well be problematic or not, just depends on who you are. And in terms of nutrients to support the immune system, I think that's another really important aspect of this. So ensuring that you've got that your vitamin D status is good, and it's summer for you over there, so I assume you're in the States somewhere, so I'm sure that's no issue for you right now, but do regularly check that if you can, because that's an essential part of overall immune kind of health. And also, if I think particularly about the thyroid, you're making sure that your selenium and your iodine, your iron intake, your B vitamins, B12, that these for you as well. And so incorporating those food choices that I spoke about earlier, but also things like seaweed and kelp, that can be helpful in, wakamani. I'm going to say wakamami. I don't even know if that's what I call it. But, seaweed salt and dulse flakes and things like that, they can be super helpful. But also, seafood. Not a lot of iodine in nori sheets. I love a nori sheet though. But also gut health. So the whole thing, 70%, I always say 90, but I think it might only be 70% of your immune system is housed in your gut. And so the more that you look after your gut, the more appropriate your immune response will be. So the collagen that we spoke of, ensuring adequate protein for sure, all of those other things that I just talked about, also important. So those are just some things off the top of my head. There are probably a lot more, but
you're amazing.
This is amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I love it.
And my sister has Hoshimoto's too, and she was told, Mikki, not to waste too much time on the subject, but she was told she can't reverse it. But I said to her, like, you just need a good functional medicine or holistic approach, a doctor that can help restore her gut and her microbiome. And we haven't really talked about that. I know a lot of nutritionists, when we talk about microbiome, but I feel like a lot of hers is related, as you said, like to leaky gut or some sort of gut issues. What's your thoughts there on like chronic disease and how it's linked to leaky gut syndrome? Or can you explain a little about that to our athletes that don't know? I know a lot of us probably do, but what are your thoughts on that, and some of the chronic inflammation and disease that's caused by the imbalances in your microbiome and your gut and stuff?
Oh, totally, Bex. And you've really just like hit the nail on the head with regards to the inflammatory process that can occur when your gut is under distress, right? And we think about it as a nutritionist, I think diet, but there are so many factors that impact on the gut outside of just diet. It's from an athlete perspective, it's that training stress. Every time you go out, particularly running above like 60% VO2 max, you're placing your gut under stress. You've got the environmental toxins, you've got lack of sleep, you've got emotional stress. It all will impact on your body stress response in the same way. And stress over time reduces the production of stomach acid, and then that can start and also break down those tight junctures in your gut that is responsible for allowing nutrients through. And so they need to open when you eat to allow the nutrients through to your bloodstream, etc. But if over time, if these are being degraded, then they don't quite shut quite so well, and then that's when you start letting those kind of food-based proteins and stuff into your system, sparking an immune response, which then can result in an overactive immune system and immune response. And the problem is, it's like with Hashimoto's, for example, is that your body looks at certain food proteins and starts attacking them because they are foreign, but then it starts to get confused and starts attacking its own tissue. And that's I've heard it described before that your thyroid tissue looks a lot like a foreign antibody, particularly gluten. Gluten, that's I don't even know that I said that, Dan, but I'm sure you are. I'm sure you're aware, but gluten is one of the most problematic kind of food proteins with autoimmune conditions. And it's that attack of your own tissue that really causes the problem. And then once your immune system starts firing, then it can start firing on all cylinders, and that's not a good thing. And then that's one of the reasons why autoimmune issues cluster. So someone might start with Hashimoto's, then they may develop celiac disease, they may, all of these other things as well. So vague, all of these other things. And if we think about that chronic disease, and so outside of autoimmune conditions, we think about, type 2, let's say type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, neurological conditions, they all have their basis in that inflammatory response. So anything that increases inflammation and doesn't allow for inflammation to turn off is going to progress those types of conditions. Because inflammation is a really necessary part of our immune response, but it's that chronic underlying inflammation which degrades our gut health. I agree, Bex. I think that, working on that, the gut health aspect, and depending on who you are and what would trigger you as an individual, because we're all different, and also there's a genetic basis there as well, that'll change that'll kind of nuance the approach a little bit. But some of those things that I discussed, Dan, with your question, are sort of across the board, really, I would say.
Awesome. Amazing. I kind of treated myself I just self-diagnosed myself with leaky gut. I'll try and be quick, because I had Siri will tell you my pain. It was really weird timing. It would be when I was really hungry and I hadn't eaten for a long period of time. The cramping was so bad that it would put me in bed, and I don't talk about it much. And I was like, I am so done with this pain. And I know MC had been through the same thing, and that's when I started to listen to the Chris Kresser and the functional medicine approach. And I was like, it's my gut. It's from all this crap that I ate when I was racing, the heat, the conditions, the body stress. I think most triathletes or most endurance athletes have some sort of gut distress or some sort of like issues with their tummy. And I had to actually do a complete 3-month gut reset. A guy in Boulder who's a functional medicine doctor did it, and it was it completely healed myself. And I had to do it because I was at the point where I was in so much pain, I couldn't handle it anymore. And I thought I had cancer in my stomach, but it ended up just being like a really imbalance in my microbiome in my stomach. I did a whole reset, and I'm so thankful for you and people that guide people with these issues, because I would never have wanted to go any further. So thanks for that, Mikki. It's really important.
Mate, and it's, it's that you hear that quite a bit, and it's quite a bit. No, you don't, because people think it's an inevitable part of being an athlete is to experience kind of gut issues as well. And particularly in light of, we're told we have to eat within 30 minutes of starting training, and then within 30 minutes of finishing training. And a lot of the gut distress happens because not only is your gut, like when you are training, all the blood flow is diverted from your gut to your muscles. And then there's this period of time post-training where it all kind of reverses and goes back to the gut, but it also brings with it these inflammatory cytokines and all these other things which are necessary for healing, but can just ramp up that inflammation and oxidative stress so much more. There are some simple things that you can do, and anything that I've learned, Bex, you talk about Chris Kresser, amazing. The reason I know so much is because I too listen to people like Chris Kresser and Rob Wolf and a whole host of other kind of Dr. Michael Ruscio is another one, and they're amazing and their techniques are amazing. And so a lot of my blog contents and the things that I talk about is because I listen to those guys as well. But, whilst there are periods of time where stress will be higher and your body will respond in that way, it doesn't have to be this inevitable part of training for you to experience gut issues, even if it is just like, a poo in a tree, in a bush as you're going out like that, it might happen, but it's not necessarily ideal. And, you might be able to do something about that, even if it's not that real chronic issue that you spoke about.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad we're both fans of Chris Kresser. This question here. How are you going for time, Mikki? We don't want to take too much of your time because we know it's
I'm still good.
How about one more question?
Okay. So Vanessa's actually, she's a world champion medalist too for her age. She's a very amazing athlete, national champion, and she's doing so well this year. She's asking for female athletes, are there any daily supplement vitamins that you would recommend we take during training? We kind of touched on the BCAAs, and the iron, but what else?
Yeah, so BCAAs, iron. Regardless of male or female, I would say magnesium is critical, and I'm sure that everyone here probably takes a magnesium supplement as well. Zinc is another one, actually. It's often kind of overlooked, but it's an important, and this is one I should have mentioned on Dan's question as well, with gut resiliency and stuff, and also stomach acid production. We need an adequate amount of zinc for that. It is really... It is individual, I say, a kind of person, but you just don't get what you used to be able to get from food. And so those are because we've already mentioned BCAAs and iron, I would say probably the zinc and the magnesium would be the two other ones. And then it would be kind of individual, and not necessarily because you're a female or because you're a male, but just because of your individual requirements.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to let you go now. We have more questions, but we're so grateful. And Mikki, we'd love to make you an honorary guest member, a VIP member of our triathlon club. If you'd like to join our Facebook group and have access to all our club discounts and everything, we'd love to have you. If you can handle our athletes bombarding you questions on the group, you're welcome to ignore them. That'd be amazing to have you in our team.
Oh, mate, that would be amazing. I love community, and particularly athlete community. Like, who doesn't, you know? So I would just be honoured to be an honorary member, particularly because I'm not even a triathlete, you know, but I'm a runner. I love to run.
That's awesome. We're a triathlete. We're all family. We have 350 members on our group. So thank you, Mikki. That will be amazing.
Pleasure. Awesome.
Thank you so much. I mean, this was just gold. It really was. So thank you for all your sharing your brilliance with us. And to the team, thanks for being here. Mary Carmen, thank you for your help with this. Becky, thank you, Mikki, and we look forward to having you in our lives now forevermore.
Oh, yay. Oh, yay. Thank you so much.
You have your website on our group, but could you type in your website? Because I'm sure there's people that are going to want to do, you know, a consult or something like that.
Much.
Could you type in your website for us so it's there?
Sure thing.
Yeah,
MikkiWilliden.com. I'm super active on Instagram and also on Facebook in the little stories kind of icon. And just before I go, I know there's a man in here, and he's got iPhone as opposed to his actual name, but he looks like he's got blue light blocking glasses on, and I just think that's so on point with what you need to be doing. It might not even be, it might just be sunnies.
Is that there?
Because I think the thing is, one thing I'll just finish off with is that, you know, it comes back to what I kind of opened with, is that it comes down back to health, you know, and diet is definitely one aspect of it, but you cannot kind of eat your way out of really poor habits around devices, around lack of sleep, around overtraining and things like that. So and oftentimes people think because diet is so tangible, it's the one thing they can kind of hook onto and change, and that should be able to change everything. That's not always the case as well. So, but I know that you guys are all up to it, so it's important. So that's all good. Anyway, thanks so much for having me, team, and look forward to seeing you on Facebook.
Yay!
Awesome.
Thank you, Mikki. We love you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. We love you.
We love you.
Hi there, Cam here again. Thanks very much, Mikki. Mikki's been kind enough to offer our listeners a special discount on her online nutrition plans. So if you use the code BeckandSiri15, that's all in caps, BeckandSiri15 on Mikki's website, which is MikkiWilliden.com. I'll put all this in the show notes. You'll get 15% off any of her online memberships and nutrition plans. If you're a Team Sirius member, you can actually get 25% off. So if you want to join as a member, you can go to teamsiriustriclub.com, and if you're already a member, just jump onto the app, and Mikki's discount code will be there under discounts. So thanks again, Mikki, and we'll see you all again next week.